Hello, welcome back to Introduction to Christianity 2 at Aoyama Gakuin University. My name is Reverend Christian Zebley. I'm your professor for this course, and I'm also a Presbyterian pastor and the lead pastor at Redeemer Church of Roppongi in Tokyo. Today's lecture is Lecture 2, The Four Traditions of Christianity. And in this course, we are studying and exploring Christianity together as a global, diverse, multicultural religious movement that involves 2.4 billion Christians in the world out of a world population of roughly 7.9 billion people. So Christianity is the world's largest religion, roughly 1/3 of world population. So in this class, we are looking at Christianity from several perspectives: the academic, cultural, experiential, and global perspective. We are also, number one, looking at the origins and historical development of Christianity. Two, we are looking at Christian thought and teaching. And three, Christian belief and practices. What do Christians actually believe, and how do they practice their faith? Last week, I talked about the textbooks for this course. This information is also on CoursePower. The main text for this course is Global Gospel: An Introduction to Christianity on 5 Continents by Professor Douglas Jacobsen. You can buy this book very easily on the internet as a Kindle version at amazon.co.jp or amazon.com. It is roughly 2,400 yen, so a very easy book to purchase electronically. You can also order it, the print version, at the Aoyama bookstore. I'd also like you to use this secondary book called Questions of Life, which is a book that is used with the Alpha course, which is a popular Introduction to Christianity course based at Holy Trinity Brompton Church in London. And this book explores Christianity from a practical perspective based on questions many people ask about Christianity, like, who is Jesus? Why did Jesus die? Why and how do I pray? Now, this is a little bit easier to read than Global Gospel. The English is a little more like daily conversation, and I think you'll enjoy it. And I'm also using videos that go along with some of the chapters, which will be used on CoursePower, so you can click on those links when they're assigned during certain weeks. You also need a Bible for this course, and I recommend also having a Bible in Japanese too. You can buy Japanese Bibles at Christian bookstores in Tokyo, the Aoyama Gakuin bookstore, and I would recommend the Shinkaiyaku version of the Japanese Bible. I would like you to download the Bible, the English Standard Version, in English. You can read a free copy of the English Standard Version of the Bible at this website, www.esv.org. You can also find that on the App Store if you just type in ESV Bible. So that is a free download that you can then have the English Bible, the English Standard Version, on your device or computer. So please download that if possible. Our Bible verse for this week 2 comes to us from John's Gospel, chapter 11, verse 25. I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. In Japanese, Yesu wa iwareta, watashi wa yomigaeri desu, inochi desu. Watashi o shinjiru mono wa shinde mo ikiru no desu. So this verse is very relevant for this time of year because Christians around the world have just celebrated Easter Sunday, which was on April 4th, 2021. And Christians everywhere of many different traditions on Easter Sunday celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. As we begin today's lecture, I am going to just simply review a few points from last week's lecture on global Christianity, a very brief history. So these points that I'm reviewing are important to remember for later in the course when we will have a short quiz. You don't need to worry about that today, but as we get into Lecture 2, I'm simply taking a few minutes to review a few important points from last week's lecture. So last week we learned that Christianity had global aspirations, which is a word that conveys an ambition or a hope from the beginning. Jesus gave the Great Commission to his disciples. This is like a great mission assignment that he gave to them. We can read Jesus speaking to the disciples about this Great Commission in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 28, verses 18 through 20. I'll read it to you. And Jesus came and said to them, All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. So from the very beginning, Jesus gave his disciples an assignment to go and make disciples of all nations. We also last week talked a little bit about the early Christianity timeline, and we discussed the concepts of BC, meaning before Christ, and AD, Latin for Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord. And we talked about the fact that Jesus was most likely born, according to the majority of scholars, around 4 BC and would have died roughly around 30 AD. And in this course, we will use the terms BC and AD rather than BCE or CE. On page 5, we read a really important point that I want you to remember in this course. By the year 1000, Christianity had become the most geographically widespread religion on earth. It had millions of followers spread across Asia, Europe, and Northern Africa. Please remember this from Global Gospel, page 5, that by 1000 AD, Christianity had become the most geographically widespread religion on earth. And in these statistics from last week's lecture, we can see Christianity as a global movement now as well. In 1900, 67% of world Christians lived in Europe. But by 2015, just 115 years later, the distribution of world Christians had changed radically. In 2015, 25% lived in Europe, 25% lived in Africa, 15% lived in Asia, and 10% in North America, and 25% in Latin America. So by 2015, we see that Christianity had been distributed around the globe. We also talked a little bit last week about the global Christian North and South. You can read about that on page 11 in Global Gospel. This is a picture of the church attendance in the world this data was taken, I believe, in around 2015. Now, so we see in the Global South, we see the majority of church attendance is happening in the Global South, which is a shift from the Global North. And Global Gospel points out that this is not really based on our concept of the equator, but it's more of a slanted line coming up here from just north of Latin America over the top of Africa and cutting here through Asia. And that gives us a visual concept of the global north and the global south. Dr. Jacobsen also uses the concept of Christianity being flat. And he gets this concept from the writer Thomas Friedman, who wrote a book called The World is Flat. And he quotes, Christianity has entered a similarly flat era in its own history. Today, no single region of the Christian world can claim to be the dominant center. That's on Global Gospel, page 11. So in a sense, according to Jacobsen, using this concept from Friedman's book, The World is Flat, which is about the world economy being flat because of the internet, he uses the same concept to say that Christianity as a global movement is now in a flat era because it's distributed around the world, and not one region of the world can claim to be the Christian center anymore. Here's a picture that we looked at last week as well, just an image of world Christianity as a movement that has distributed globally over 2,000 years, beginning in Palestine, throughout the Mediterranean and Asia and Africa, and now spread throughout the world. So the message is clear. Christianity is no longer European. It has become the most thoroughly diverse, multicultural religion of all time. It is also the most globally dispersed. You can read that on page 9 of Global Gospel. I want you to remember this quotation, that Christianity is no longer European. It has become the most thoroughly diverse, multicultural religion of all time. It is also the most globally dispersed. Okay, so today we're going to move into chapter 2, the four traditions of Christianity. The four traditions of Christianity. This is chapter 2 in Global Gospel. We learned that there are 2.4 billion Christians in the world. Now, Jacobsen uses the figure 2.5 billion. Looking at some recent statistics, I think it's more accurate to say 2.4. It's somewhere between the two, but for our purposes, we'll say 2.4 billion Christians in the world that are distributed within 35,000 different Christian groups or denominations. So a denomination, in Japanese we say kyoha. For example, a large Protestant denomination in Japan would be the Nihon Kiristo Kyodan, the United Church of Christ in Japan. Or a denomination in the United States might be the United Methodist Church or the Presbyterian Church in America. And then there are 5 million local congregations in the world. 5 million local congregations. Now, a local congregation is an individual church. Maybe in Japanese, Chiho Kyokai, a local church. So in the world, there are 2.4 billion Christians who make up 35,000 different Christian groups of denominations. And then within those 35,000, there are 5 million local congregations. Then, this is very important. There are four main traditions of Christianity in the world. 98% of all Christians fall into these four traditions. Number one, Catholicism. 50% of Christians in the world are within the Catholic tradition. 10% fall within the Eastern Orthodox tradition, what we call Eastern Orthodoxy. Then 20% of world Christians fall within Protestantism. You might hear in Japan, Protestantal Kyokai. All those churches around the world are made up into Protestantism. And then 20% of Christians in the world are part of Pentecostalism. So in this class today, we're going to talk about these four traditions: Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, Protestantism, and Pentecostalism. And now I'd like to show you some images of the four traditions from different places in the world. First, let's talk about Catholicism. 50% of the Christian believers in the world fall into this great tradition of Catholicism. This image is taken from a Roman Catholic worship space. You can see how big this area is, the beautiful woodwork, the stained glass, the large doors. This image is taken from a Roman Catholic cathedral. This is a painting of the Vatican located in Rome, Italy. The Vatican is a very large complex where the Roman Catholic Pope and many top leaders in the Roman Catholic Church are based. It's the headquarters of Catholicism, and it is actually considered an independent state within the city of Rome, Italy. So the Vatican is an independent state located within the city of Rome, Italy, and it is the headquarters of the Roman Catholic Church. Remember, 50% of Christians in the world are Catholic. We sometimes say Roman Catholic because it's based in Rome, and therefore it would have a great headquarters. This is a painting of the Vatican located in Rome. In the Vatican, you will find the Pope. That is his headquarters. Now, the Pope travels around the world, and this is a picture of the current Pope, Pope Francis. The Pope is the top leader. He is the head of the Roman Catholic Church. And I think in Japanese, he's known as Ho'o, the Pope. And so for our purposes today, I want you to remember that Roman Catholics have one main leader. They have many priests, they have bishops, they have archbishops, but at the very top of their leadership structure is the Pope, who they believe has been appointed by God to lead their large global church called Roman Catholicism. This is a picture of some Roman Catholic youth praying outside a cathedral in Europe. This picture shows a group of Roman Catholic teenagers hanging out together. I believe this was taken in Malaysia. Now remember, we're saying that 50% of Christians in the world fall into the tradition of Catholicism. And if there are 2.4 billion Christians in the world, then 1.2 billion of those Christians are going to be Roman Catholic. That means you will be able to find Catholic churches in almost any country in the world. And Catholics live in different continents of the world. They live in North America, South America, Africa, Asia. They live in Australia, and they speak many different languages. Christianity is a global religion. It's a multicultural movement all over the world, but 50% of those followers of Jesus are Catholic. So we can find Catholics anywhere in the world. Now let's talk about the second tradition in world Christianity, Eastern Orthodox churches. We sometimes say Eastern Orthodoxy. Now the Eastern Orthodox churches are as old as churches in Catholicism, but they are much smaller in number, and they're located mostly in Eastern Europe and the Middle East. And they are similar to Catholic churches, but they're different as well. And you can see some of these differences in the images I'm going to show you. This is a picture of an Eastern Orthodox priest and bishop, and you'll see that they are wearing black robes, and one has a large cross as a necklace, and another is wearing a very large gold object. Many Eastern Orthodox priests have beards, and also in Eastern Orthodoxy, priests are allowed to marry, whereas in Roman Catholicism, the priests do not marry. They are what's considered celibate, unmarried. But in Eastern Orthodoxy, priests, local priests, are able to marry. But for the most part, the bishops, they're higher than the priests, do not marry. So this is a picture of an Eastern Orthodox priest and bishop in their black robes. Now this is a picture of the top of a Russian Orthodox church. Now remember, within Eastern Orthodoxy, there are different churches, like the Russian Orthodox Church and the Greek Orthodox Church. These churches are sometimes, the top of the churches are sometimes called onion domes because they have this round top at the top of their church. And the crosses are often different than a typical Christian cross you might find in a Protestant church or a Catholic church. Specifically in the Russian Orthodox Church, many of their crosses have not one, but three crossbeams, and the third crossbeam is slanted. So in Orthodoxy, you will find some differences from both Catholicism and Protestantism. Now, Eastern Orthodox Christians love artwork, and they use these wooden paintings that display pictures of Jesus or the apostles or different biblical scenes. They use these wooden objects that they call icons in their worship. And they believe that they're holy, and they believe that in worship, when they venerate them, that the believer experiences holiness. And this is a picture of Jesus on an Eastern Orthodox icon. Okay, now I'm going to show you some images from the third tradition in global Christianity, Protestantism. Protestantism is a movement that was born out of Roman Catholicism. And you may have heard of some great figures in the Protestant Reformation, the Protestantal Chapter. The Protestant Reformation began in 1517 with Martin Luther, who was a priest in Germany. And he was very upset at the corruption in the Roman Catholic Church. And so he wrote a document called the 95 Theses, which he nailed to the door in the church in Wittenberg, Germany, which began a movement of people, believers, priests, church leaders who no longer wanted to be part of the Roman Catholic Church. There were others like William Tyndale in England who translated the New Testament into English, making the Bible available to the common person in the church. There was also John Calvin in France, a great theologian who later moved to Geneva, Switzerland, and wrote down many of the theological ideas of the Protestant Reformation, which was a movement of leaders who were trying to reform the Catholic Church. But in the process, a new tradition in Christianity was born. There are now Protestant Christians in many denominations, Kyoha, all around the world, and they come from many different ethnicities. Here's an African American pastor in the United States, and he's dressed very casually. Sometimes Protestants are casual, and sometimes they're formal. This is a Methodist pastor wearing his robes for worship. This is a Baptist church located somewhere in the United States. It's a very simple building with a simple church spire, and you'll see there is not a cross on top of that church spire, although some Protestant churches will have crosses, and some Protestant churches will be very big and others will be small. Protestantism has met a lot of diversity within its movement. Protestants are united around their love of the Bible. They do not have a pope in their tradition or a world headquarters because Protestantism is made up of many different Christian denominations, but Protestants are united in their love of the Bible. This is a picture of a Protestant youth group in Haiti, in the Caribbean. This is a picture of a Presbyterian church, one of the groups within Protestantism, and you can see it has a very formal worship environment with a large cross, the woodwork, a large choir, and classical musicians. Now remember, Protestant churches are very diverse. Some are very informal in their worship. Some meet in houses. Some meet in big buildings. It's not as consistent as Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy. Protestantism is a movement that grew out of Catholicism. And there are many different kinds of Protestant groups around the world. There are the Baptists, the Methodists, the Presbyterians, the independent Protestant churches. There are many different kinds of Protestant groups or denominations within the worldwide movement of Protestantism that grew out of Roman Catholicism in the early 16th century, beginning with Martin Luther in 1517. Now, let's talk about Pentecostalism, which is the newest tradition in world Christianity. Remember, we're talking about Christianity in four traditions: Roman Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, Protestantism, and Pentecostalism. And Pentecostalism, like Protestantism, is a movement. Pentecostal Christians can be found all over the world, but they have some things that unite them. They are very expressive in their worship. They like to sing in loud voices. They sometimes like to raise their hands in worship. And they're very focused on not just knowing God in the Bible, but experiencing God through the power of the Holy Spirit and the gifts of the Spirit. This is a picture of a Pentecostal church in London, England. You can see it is very diverse racially. And people are raising their hands in worship. Here's another picture of Pentecostals worshiping together. And you can see that some of them have their faces pointing upward. Their worship is very expressive. Sometimes it's loud. People might be shouting out or crying out, because Pentecostals are focused on experiencing God, and they talk about the power of God, and they believe in healings and miracles as well. So Pentecostal worship is very dynamic, and it's a powerful thing to experience. Sometimes Pentecostals worship together in large concerts. You may have heard about the Hillsong Christian movement. I believe that Hillsong has had concerts here in Tokyo, and thousands of young people will come together to worship Jesus in a rock concert atmosphere. It's very powerful. Again, hands in the air, people crying out to God and experiencing the power of God together. Well, we've just looked at images in the four traditions of global Christianity: Catholicism, Eastern Orthodoxy, Protestantism, and Pentecostalism. Now, in these next few slides, we're going to explore in a little more detail the theology and beliefs of these four traditions. Remember, Global Gospel tells us that 98% of all Christians in the world, 2.4 billion Christians, fall within these four traditions. So let's start with a little bit more detail with Catholicism. Catholicism is one Roman Catholic Church. Now, there are many different churches, different cities and countries in the world, but Roman Catholics consider themselves one Roman Catholic Church based in Rome at the Vatican. And I just showed you a painting of the Vatican, which is a large complex where the Pope and other leaders live within the city of Rome, Italy, and it's considered an independent state. So Catholicism is about one Roman Catholic Church around the world based in Rome at the Vatican. It goes back to the time of Jesus, so it is very historically focused with continuity with the past. In its worship and prayer life, there is also an emphasis on the mother of Jesus, the Virgin Mary. Catholics have a history of monasticism, Shudoin Seikatsu. These are priests and monks and nuns, all who are non-married, who form different groups like the Benedictines, the Dominicans, that learn how to live together as non-married people, and their lives are centered on prayer. They are called monastics. Roman Catholic worship services are called the Eucharist or the Mass. And in Roman Catholicism, salvation is about God's grace coming together with human effort for a lifelong journey towards holiness. Now, if you want to understand that more, I want you to read the chapter 2, in Global Gospel, which will describe in more detail this Roman Catholic understanding of salvation, of experiencing God's grace with human effort for a lifelong journey towards holiness. Let's talk more about orthodoxy. Sometimes when we're talking about Eastern Orthodoxy, we just say orthodoxy to make it a little more simple. Orthodoxy is a network of churches. So there's the Russian Orthodox Church, the Greek Orthodox Church, the Coptic Church, and others that form a network of churches that make up Orthodoxy. It, like the Roman Catholic Church, is historically focused because it can be traced back to the early Christian centuries. But remember, it breaks away from Roman Catholicism in 1054 with the event called the Great Schism. Orthodox worship services last often 2 to 3 hours, and there's a sense of divine liturgy where they believe that their worship services are participating in the worship in heaven. From the Orthodox point of view, in terms of salvation, they believe every newborn baby is a child of God who's on a lifelong journey to remove sin and become holy. They call that deification. So salvation is a little bit different than the Catholic understanding where God's grace works with human efforts in the sacraments. In the Orthodox understanding, salvation is restoration of spiritual health that people receive as newborn babies. And the ultimate goal is to enter into deeper communion with God and be surrounded by divine love. This is a picture of the top of an Orthodox church, a domed ceiling called an oculus. And they believe that when they're worshiping, that they can look up, and this domed ceiling helps them feel connected to the worship in heaven. And so they believe their worship services on earth in their churches, when they're happening, are participating in the worship going on in heaven. So in many ways, Orthodoxy is a very mystical tradition within Christianity. Let's talk a little bit more about Protestantism. Now, it's not one church, but a movement with many competing churches. Remember, we talked a little bit about the Protestant Reformation with Luther and Calvin and others. And they wanted to reform the Catholic Church, but they ended up starting a protest movement against the Catholic Church. Came many churches working together in a new movement. And there are many different Protestant groups. There are the Lutherans, the Anglicans, the Presbyterians, the Methodists, the Baptists, the Evangelical Free, the Congregationalists, and more. There are hundreds of Christian groups or denominations, kyoha, within Protestantism. Yet there are several theological ideas that unite Protestants together. Remember, Protestants don't have a pope, but they have these theological ideas that unite them together. Number one, the priesthood of all believers. What that means, Protestants don't believe they need a priest the way you might have a Roman Catholic priest or a Greek Orthodox priest in Orthodoxy. Now, they have ministers and pastors like myself, who are teachers within the church, But they believe that every person has direct access to God through Jesus Christ, through a personal relationship with God. In Jesus Christ, they believe every believer can go to God directly in prayer and worship. Number two, they have a strong belief on the authority of the Bible. The Bible is their authority in worship and life. And therefore, their sense of salvation is different than the Catholic salvation idea or the Orthodox idea. For Protestants, salvation is grace alone, by faith alone, not by human effort. So Catholics believe that human effort needs to cooperate with God's grace to move towards holiness. But Protestants believe that experiencing God in Jesus Christ, coming to faith in Jesus Christ, is something that God does, and people simply receive it as a free gift of grace. For example, Protestants will often point to this verse in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 through 9. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing, it is the gift of God. Anatagata wa megumi no yue ni shinko ni yotte tsukuwareta no desu. Sore wa jibun jishin kara deta koto de wa naku, kami kara no tamamono desu. So for Protestants, salvation is a gift of God that they receive as a free gift. Okay, let's talk then about the fourth tradition, Pentecostalism, which, like Protestantism, is a movement, not one church, but has spread throughout the world after being birthed in 1906 at the Azusa Street Mission Revival in Los Angeles, California. So it started in one church in Los Angeles in 1906, but has now spread around the world to many different churches. Pentecostalism is focused on following the movement of the Holy Spirit and experiencing the gifts of the Holy Spirit in worship. For Pentecostals, salvation could be described as moving into greater fellowship with God, greater intimacy with God in Christ Jesus. But similar to Protestants, they have similar theological ideas that salvation comes by grace alone, with the authority of the Bible, and the priesthood of all believers, that the individual believer does not need a priest and may have a pastor to help them understand and lead them in worship, but they don't need a Roman Catholic priest or an Orthodox priest. In worship, they can go directly to God and experience His love and grace. And for Pentecostals, there is much more emphasis on experience with God through prayer and healing. Now, Protestants and Roman Catholics and Orthodox may have some of that as well, depending on which church they're attending. But for Pentecostals, there is a real focus on experiencing God in prayer and healing. Now, the Pentecostal Church, as a world movement of churches, started in Los Angeles on Azusa Street in this church building, the Apostolic Faith Gospel Mission. And it was what we call a revival led by this pastor, this African American pastor named Reverend William Seymour. In 1906, in that church building, there were people gathered together. And what's interesting about it, it was a multicultural gathering. There were white people and African American people and Asian people together. And they were worshiping and praying to God in Jesus Christ. And the Holy Spirit moved and started the Pentecostal movement that began in Los Angeles in that revival and has now spread to many different churches around the world. What's interesting to some people today is that Azusa Street in Los Angeles is also the location of Little Tokyo, of where many Japanese Americans are based in Los Angeles. Some people believe that perhaps that is pointing to the fact that there may be a movement of God's Spirit in Japan someday in many different churches. It's just interesting, though, here historically, that the Pentecostal movement began in Azusa Street, which is now can be found in Little Tokyo in Los Angeles. Some of you may have visited LA, or if you get a chance to go to LA, I would encourage you to go down to Little Tokyo and see Azusa Street, where the World Pentecostal movement began. Okay, now, what about these four traditions of Christianity in Japan? Well, they all exist here in Japan, and I'm going to show you just some pictures of some churches that you can attend, and there's others besides these pictures where you can experience these four traditions of Christianity in Japan. For example, St. Ignatius Catholic Church near Sophia University. You can see that church. It's very, if you go to Sophia Daigaku, you will see this church close by. It's a very big Catholic church, and you could go there and experience a Roman Catholic worship service right here in Japan. There's actually a large Orthodox church in Tokyo called Holy Resurrection Cathedral near Ochanomizu Station. And there are not a lot of Orthodox churches in Japan, but there is a large one here in Tokyo, and there are others in other parts of Japan as well. But if you'd like to attend an Orthodox church, there is one here in Tokyo near Ochanomizu, Holy Resurrection Cathedral. Now, there are many Protestant churches in Japan, and one that's close to the Aoyama Gakuin campus in Shibuya would be Hichirigaoka Kyokai, which is part of the United Church of Christ in Japan, the Nihon Kiristo Kyodan, and it is also part of the Protestant Methodist tradition, which Aoyama Gakuin is connected to. So if you wanted to attend a Methodist Protestant church that's very connected to Aoyama Gakuin, there are many professors and teachers at Aoyama Gakuin who have attended or attend this church now. You could easily go to a worship service there at Hijirigaoka Kyokai. And you need to check the church website to see if they're meeting in person or online, especially with the coronavirus situation. But this is an example of one of many Protestant churches that are in Japan. This is a picture from the Hijirigaoka Kyokai website of their congregation. There are many Protestant churches in Japan, as well as many Roman Catholic churches. There are not as many Orthodox churches, but quite a few Roman Catholic churches and Protestant churches. There are also Pentecostal churches in Japan. You can find Pentecostal churches all over the country. One here in Tokyo that I am familiar with, and I know the pastor there, Pastor Talo, is the New Hope Church in Tokyo, and I believe they meet near Ochanomizu. And it's a big church with many Japanese and foreigners worshiping together. It's a bilingual church, and there's a focus on the Holy Spirit, and that would be a church where you could experience a Pentecostal church in Japan. So these are just some images of the four traditions of Christianity in Japan: Roman Catholicism, Orthodoxy, Protestantism, and Pentecostalism. And here in Tokyo, there are quite a few churches. There are Japanese churches, international churches. You can even find some ethnic churches. Sometimes you find Korean churches in Tokyo, or Chinese churches, or people from different African countries. So if you're looking to attend a church, you can ask me for some ideas, and later in the course we will be doing our worship report, where you will go out and choose a church, attend its worship, and write a report about it. Okay, So, for today's survey, as we've looked at these 4 traditions of Christianity in Japan, I had these questions for you on Course Power, and I'd like you to complete them by next Monday, April 19th at 6 p.m. These 3 questions. What experience have you had with these 4 traditions in Japan or overseas? Which of the 4 traditions do you find the most interesting? And 3, if you became a Christian, what tradition would you join? If you are a Christian, what tradition do you belong to? So you don't need to worry about your answers to these questions. I'm just trying to get you to engage with the material we've looked at. So consider in these questions these 4 traditions within global Christianity: Catholicism, Orthodoxy, Protestantism, and Pentecostalism. I also, in Course Power, have put a video of a man named Atsushi who became a Christian and was very involved in the gospel music movement here in Japan. And if you look at that video, you will see people that attend a Protestant church in Japan. I think you'll enjoy the video. Okay, and for next week, Lecture 3, for those of you that want to start working on material for next week, I know some of you are working ahead. I'd like you to, for next week, to read the Alpha book, Questions of Life. Please read Chapter 1, Is There More to Life Than This? And Chapter 2, Who is Jesus? And I'd also like you, along with those chapters, to watch the Alpha film series on YouTube that corresponds with those chapters. Is there more to life than this? And who is Jesus? You will see those links on Course Power for Lecture 3. So you can begin to work on that later this week, or you can work on it next week. But for this week, you need to have watched this video and read Chapter 2 of Global Gospel and filled out the survey questions about your own experience with the 4 Christian traditions. You need to fill out that survey by next Monday, April 19th by 6 p.m. so I can give you attendance for the class. Okay? Thank you very much for participating in this course, and I look forward to seeing you on this video lecture next week. Have a great week. You can email me on Course Power if you have any questions, and I hope you're doing well. Take care. Bye-bye.